Hi everyone, the book I'm reviewing today is called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Definitely you have to read this book. I know a few of you say I've got many must-read top 10. This is in the top 10 for 2023, and definitely because we have never thought or have been taught about money from a psychology perspective, right? We are taught about money with Excel and spreadsheets and interest rates and savings rates and financial advice, and it's all very mathematical. Many people get confused, and this book is through research and the work that Morgan has done through the financial crises that have occurred, and what he realizes a trend and a pattern. And it really speaks to the psychology of money. As humans, when we spend money, we're not spending money from a thinking brain perspective. It's more an emotional decision. How am I feeling? How does spending this money make me feel? What's my state of mind? And he dives into several concepts across the book, which I'll highlight as I review. It's absolutely fascinating and scary at the same time. It will empower you with, even if it's just one new habit that you can form or be more aware of in terms of your financial spending. It can definitely be life-changing. And we'll start off with an introduction and the premise for this book. The premise of this book is that doing well with money has a little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. And behavior is hard to teach, even to really smart people. A genius who loses control of their emotions can be a financial disaster. The opposite is also true. Ordinary folks with no financial education can be wealthy if they have a handful of behavioral skills that have nothing to do with formal measures of intelligence. Have realistic views about what money does and doesn't do to our happiness. I've seen no compelling evidence. Most of the reason why I believe is that we think about and are taught about money in ways that are too much like physics, with rules and laws, and not enough like psychology, with emotions and nuance. Physics isn't controversial. It's guided by laws. Finance is different. It's guided by people's behaviors, and how I behave might make sense to me, but look crazy to you. The more I studied and wrote about the financial crisis, the more I realized that you could understand it better through the lenses of psychology and history, not finance. I love Voltaire's observation that history never repeats itself. Man always does. This applies so well to how we behave with money. We go into a chapter that he calls No One's Crazy. Your personal experiences with money make up maybe 0.00000001% of what's happened in the world, but maybe 80% of how you think the world works. The challenge for us is that no amount of studying or open-mindedness can genuinely recreate the power of fear and uncertainty. I can read about what it was like to lose everything during the Great Depression, but I don't have the emotional scars of those who actually experienced it. And the person who lived through it can't fathom why someone like me could come across as complacent about things like owning stocks. We see the world through a different lens. Spreadsheets can model the historic frequency of big stock market declines, but they can't model the feelings of coming home, looking at your kids, and wondering if you've made a mistake that will impact their lives. Studying history makes you feel like you understand something, but until you've lived through it and personally felt its consequences, you may not understand it enough to change your behavior. We all think we know how the world works, but we've all only experienced a tiny sliver of it. As investor Michael Batnick says, some lessons have to be experienced before they can be understood. We are all victims in different ways to that truth. And that's just it, right? The solutions that work for me won't work for you. How I think and view about money comes from my lived experiences, and that's very different to yours. What my aims, my purpose, and what drives me is vastly different to yours. So my financial decisions and my financial planning and how I look at money and how I behave with money is vastly different to how you would. This is now from a chapter called Luck and Risk. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. If you give luck and risk their proper respect, you realize that when judging people's financial success, both your own and others, it's never as good or as bad as it seems. I think most of us intuitively know this is true. The quality of your education and the doors that open for you are heavily linked to your parents' socio-economic status. And that's another one, right? And I think it's very relevant in South Africa. We don't all start on the same playing field, and all our playing fields are not level. And the start that we get is heavily linked to our parents' socio-economic status. It defined the education we received, it defined the schooling we went to, it defined our networks. Many of us have worked through it, but that was the start, and the level and the playing field was not level. He's got a chapter on compounding. For anyone who studied finance, we talk about compounding. His chapter is called Confounding Compounding. $81.5 billion of Warren Buffett's $84.5 billion net worth came after his 65th birthday. Our minds are not built to handle such absurdities. In terms of compounding, the amazing thing here is how big something can grow from a relatively small change in conditions. You can start with a thin layer of snow left over from a cool summer that no one would think anything of. And then, in a geological blink of an eye, the entire Earth is covered in miles-thick ice. As glaciologist Gwen Skulks put it, it is not necessarily the amount of snow that causes ice sheets, but the fact that snow, however little, lasts. The big takeaways from ice ages is that you don't need tremendous force to create tremendous results. If something compounds, if a little growth serves as the fuel for future growth, a small starting base can lead to results so extraordinary they seem to defy logic. It can be so logic-defying that you underestimate what's possible, where growth comes from, and what it can lead to. And so it is with money and compounding. Warren Buffett's skill is investing, but his secret is time. That's how compounding works. These are ridiculous, impractical numbers. The point is that what seems like small changes in growth assumptions can lead to ridiculous, impractical numbers. And so, when we are studying why something got to becoming as powerful as it has, why an ice age formed, or why Warren Buffett is so rich, we often overlook the key drivers of success. Good investing isn't necessarily about earning the highest returns, because the highest returns tend to be once-off hits that can't be repeated. It's about earning pretty good returns that you can stick with and which can be repeated for the longest period of time. That's when compounding runs wild. The opposite of this, earning huge returns that can't be held onto, leads to some tragic stories. But we'll need the next chapter to tell them. And the next chapter is called Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy. Good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions. It's about consistently not screwing up. There are a million ways to get wealthy and plenty of books on how to do so. But there's only one way to stay wealthy, some combination of frugality and paranoia. And that's a topic we don't discuss enough. Capitalism is hard, but part of the reason this happens is because getting money and keeping money are two different skills. Getting money requires taking risks, being optimistic, and putting yourself out there. But keeping money requires the opposite of taking risk. It requires humility and fear that you've made can be taken away from you just as fast. It requires frugality and an acceptance that at least some of what you've made is attributable to luck. So past success can't be relied upon to repeat indefinitely. On to the next chapter that's called Tails, You Win. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. This can be hard to deal with even if you understand the maths. It is not intuitive that an investor can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. It means we underestimate how normal it is for a lot of things to fail, which causes us to overreact when they do. Anything that is huge, profitable, famous, or influential is the result of a tail event, an outlying one in thousands or millions event, and most of our attention goes to the things that are huge, profitable, famous, or influential. When most of what we pay attention to is the result of a tail, it's easy to underestimate how rare and powerful they are. Right? Because that's what we're all looking at, we're all talking about, we're all observing, and we forget that those are the tails. The next one of my favorites, was a chapter called Freedom. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. And there's another really great chapter called Man in the Car Paradox. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. Take a moment and let that sink in. And let me tell you about the paradox. There is a paradox here. People tend to want wealth to signal to others that they should be liked and admired, but in reality, those other people often bypass admiring you, not because they don't think wealth is admirable, but because they use your wealth as a benchmark for their own desire to be liked and admired. The letter I wrote after my son was born said, "You might think you want an expensive car, a fancy watch, and a huge house, but I'm telling you, you don't. What you want is respect and admiration from other people, and you think having expensive stuff will bring it. It almost never does, especially from the people you want to respect and admire you." The next chapter is called Wealth is What You Don't See. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. That's not how we think about wealth, because you can't contextualize what you can't see. Singer Rihanna nearly went bankrupt after overspending and sued her financial advisor. The advisor responded, "Was it really necessary to tell her that if you spend more money on things, you will end up with the things and not money?" You can laugh, and please do. But the answer is yes. People do need to be told that. When most people say they want to be a millionaire, what they might actually mean is, "I'd like to spend $1 million." And that is literally the opposite of being a millionaire. Investor Bill Mann once wrote, "There is no faster way to feel rich than to spend lots of money on really nice things. But the way to be rich is to spend money you have and to not spend money you don't have. It's really that simple." It's not hard to spot rich people. They often go out of their way to make themselves known. But wealth is hidden. It's income not spent. Wealth is an option not yet taken to buy something later. Its value lies in offering you options, flexibility, and growth to one day purchase more stuff than you could right now. Save money. The only factor you can control that generates one of the only things that matters. How wonderful. The world grew its energy wealth not by increasing the energy it had, but by decreasing the energy it needed. The important thing here is that finding more energy is largely out of control and shrouded in uncertainty. because it relies on a slippery mix of having the right geology, geography, weather, and geopolitics. But becoming more efficient with the energy we use is largely in our control. The decision to buy a lighter car or ride a bike is up to you and a 100% chance of improving efficiency. The same is true with our money. Room for error. The most important part of every plan is planning on your plan, not going according to plan. And what does this mean? The purpose of room for error or a margin of safety is to render a forecast unnecessary. Margin of safety, you can also call it room for error or redundancy. It is the only effective way to safely navigate a world that is governed by odds, not certainties, and almost everything related to money exists in that kind of world. The biggest single point of failure with money is a sole reliance on a paycheck to fund short-term spending needs, with no savings to create a gap between what you think your expenses are and what they might be in the future. The trick that often goes overlooked, even by the wealthiest, is what we saw in Chapter 10, realizing that you don't need a specific reason to save. It's fine to save for a car, a home, or for retirement, but it's equally important to save for things you can't possibly predict or even comprehend, the financial equivalent of field mice. There's a chapter called Nothing's Free. Everything has a price, but not all prices appear on labels. But Immel said something insightful on his way out. Responding to critics who said his actions were wrong and what he should have done was obvious, Immel told his successor, "Every job looks easy when you're not the one doing it. Every job looks easy when you're not the one doing it because the challenges faced by someone in the arena are often invisible to those in the crowd." Dealing with the conflicting demands of sprawling bloat, short-term investors, regulators, unions, and entrenched bureaucracy is not only hard to do, but it's hard to even recognize the severity of the problems until you're the one dealing with them. Immel's successor, who lasted 14 months, learned this as well. Most things are harder in practice than they are in theory. Sometimes this is because we're overconfident. More often, it's because we're not good at identifying what the price of success is, which prevents us from being able to pay for it. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Let me know if you've read the book and what your thoughts were. And if you haven't, definitely go and grab a copy this weekend.